Yeah,
craziness.
exactly, exactly. All right, we got a lot of folks that are joining now, which is great. So I'm going to just kind of quickly jump into a little bit of an introduction about SMLA, and then you and I can start our conversation also, John. So that'll be great. So welcome everybody. It's good to have everybody here this morning, and here we are now in the second half of the year. It's kind of hard to imagine we're already past the first half. The first 6 months felt like about 6 years worth of activity and things going on. So congrats to us all for making it here. For those that I have not met before, my name is Ken Schmidt. I'm the CEO and founder of the SMLA, as well as TurningPoint Executive Search. We've been around for 13 years, and we do search on a national basis for sales, marketing, operations, and executive leadership positions. And the connection really to SMLA is that we do so much in the way of working with companies that are looking to combine the efforts and or collaboration between sales and marketing, that we started the SMLA back in 2011 to really help bring people together. So as you'll see as you log on and get a feel for who's in the chat this morning, it's meant to be a very diverse group, both in terms of function, but also in terms of industry. So we really try to foster that whenever possible to get people working together. Myself and I am based here in San Diego, but we work nationally. John, our speaker this morning, is based in Austin, as many of you know. He is actually our chapter president for our new Austin chapter, which is fantastic. So I'm very excited to have him here. Exactly right. Have him here this morning also to chat about what's happening in his world with Dialpad and experience and lessons that he's learned also along the way. I also want to just do a kind of quick shout out to all of our new members. We had a lot of new members join over the last 30 days or so. We did just roll out a brand new virtual membership also. You know, one of the silver linings, if you want to call it that, of COVID is that everybody's been forced online, of course. We've all been forced to become much, much more comfortable working with virtual platforms. So we now have a virtual membership available also, and we have about half a dozen, I think 6 virtual members now from really all across the country. So if you have questions about that, feel free to let us know as we go along. For those that are new to the group, or this is the first one they've sat in on, this is meant to be a very engaging and a very collaborative discussion this morning. We don't want it to be just myself and John up here speaking at everyone. We really want to get everybody engaged. So please, if you have questions, comments, we encourage you to use the chat. Everybody's going to be muted to make sure that we don't talk over each other, but please use the chat for questions, and then John and I will address those as well. Anything on the technology side, Elaine Rosen, our operations director, is also here, and so she'll be happy to answer those questions too. Okay, so with that, lastly, before we jump in, I just want to also thank our sponsors. For those of you that have not seen our website before, we have a fantastic group of sponsors, some of whom are here this morning. We've got Craig from FranNet here. We've got Ryan here from Replica Printing Services also. We've got folks that are from Out and About Communications. We've got Phil Ferrari from the video production company. We have Amy Rasdall from Billable at the Beach. So we've got some really, really strong sponsors, and we really appreciate all their support, even during this transition from being live in person to actually being virtual here. So thank you to all you sponsors for being part of that group. We really, really appreciate it. Okay, with all of that, let's go ahead and jump into our conversation. So as I said a few minutes ago, I'm very excited to have John here joining us this morning. John and I met actually about 1.5 years ago, give or take. He was just making the transition, moving out of LA into Austin. And he's already changed jobs once since he got out there. And so we've stayed in touch ever since. And is doing very, very well with the new role out there at Dialpad also. So I'm going to let John introduce himself in terms of his role and kind of what he's doing with Dialpad, and then we'll jump into our questions. And again, feel free to ask any questions that you might have in the chat, and we'll address those also. So John, do you want to start with kind of introduction of your role right now?
Certainly, yeah. Thanks so much, Ken. And it's a pleasure to virtually meet and see so many people from SMLA in the group. I'm really excited to connect with each of you one-on-one over the course of the next few months and years while I'm involved with the organization. As Ken mentioned, kind of at the outset, I'm the chapter president for the Austin SMLA, which is new and was all set to have a couple events already done, in-person events when COVID-19 hit. I have been, for the past year plus, an account executive, individual contributor at Dialpad. We are a cloud native unified communication solution, and which, as you can imagine, in today's climate is particularly relevant. It's been great for our company, and it's also really helped me learn how to be a more empathetic salesperson and engaged in the customer process. So prior to my role here, I previously worked for another software company in the sales role, and I was a college football coach for 10 years, most recently at the University of Central Florida. And between those two things, I started a business in San Diego County and consulting for sales organizations. So I'm excited to be connected and look forward to meeting each one of you and spending some time on LinkedIn with you at the very least in the short term.
Great, thank you, thank you. And Dialpad is based up in the Bay Area, correct? Is it San Jose? Is that right?
Yeah, it's San Francisco-based startup, founded in 2011. Our founders have been together for a long time. They actually created Google Voice, which most people are familiar with, the consumer telephony product. They worked at Google for a number of years, and then recently, 2011, left to start a business communications company in Dialpad. And we've been going strong since then. About 2 years ago, had an acquisition of a company called TalkIQ, which does what we call voice intelligence. It's a voice stream artificial intelligence that does real-time transcription of communication and provides real-time insights to help streamline communication, aid sales process, ramp sales agents, etc.
Very good. And how big is the team there in Austin?
In Austin, we've got about 100. Overall, we've got 18 offices globally, with right around 500 employees. And the company's been on a steady, up and to the right trajectory, and we're doing great. It's exciting to be here.
That's fantastic. Great. Thank you. Thanks for giving kind of the context and kind of the background as well. It's wonderful. Very good. So let's talk a little bit about, so obviously you went through your career kind of quickly there, and there was a lot of really interesting data points along the way. So one of my questions was, what was your initial goal to be a college football coach as your career? Is that what you kind of thought you would be heading in terms of your trajectory coming out of undergrad?
Absolutely. It was, I played college football and not quickly realized that I am definitely injury prone. I had three ACL surgeries and slowed me quite a bit, but had aspirations of playing professional football. And when those went away, I turned to coaching. I got a lot out of the sport and the community, and I really felt called to give some of that back and to help aid young men into maturity a little bit.
That's great. And did you have kind of an inclination that maybe either your approach or your strategy or communication style was gonna be conducive to being in a sales career as well?
I had yes. I think as a player, I was really interested in learning. I wanted to understand more than just my position and my role. I wanted to understand how that fit within the organization, and I was maniacal about how I applied that education to my play. And I felt like, having the interest in communicating and building relationships to further my end in becoming the best in my role that I could as a player, I would be able to share some of that excitement and hunger with the players that would one day play for me.
That's great. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure I would imagine you probably had seen a lot of different approaches and styles from coaching. Some folks might take it more of a technical nature. It's the same as managing in business also, right? Some folks kind of use the carrot and some use the stick. So I would imagine it's probably true on the football field also.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I learned in my, playing and coaching career, and even probably more so in my, business ownership and individual contributor roles since then, that there's a lot of gray area between carrot and stick, and a lot of variations of what communication style and the way it's received is going to be between those two, ends of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And I know that so you went back to school, or I guess went to school for your MBA while you were coaching also, right? Was that, I mean, how did you juggle those two things? It sounds daunting.
Yeah, it was difficult, but one of the neat things about coaching and wanting to coach at a high level is a lot of the time one of the entry level positions into a college football coach is a graduate assistant, and you have to be enrolled in classes in order to take that position. You're one of the counted coaches, so you're allowed to coach players, you're allowed to recruit. And so it's an important position that a lot of GAs look at as, they're going to sign up for classes, they're not going to go to classes. They're going to, on paper be a student academically, but really they're just there to coach and be a student athletically. For me, I saw it as an opportunity to get a free education. I had, not being a football player and wanting a college education and being the first person in my family to go to college, getting that education for my undergrad was really important to me. And it carried through when I saw the opportunity to get an advanced degree. I assumed that I wouldn't be a football coach forever, just like I hadn't gotten to be a player forever. So I wanted to have some education to fall back on, and something to, also understand at a high level in careers beyond football.
Well, you've certainly set the bar high now for your kids with an MBA and a bachelor's degree. That's great.
Yeah, that is not at all my intention, but I hope that they find some inspiration in that. My wife is an excellent story of education and development too. So I think my kiddos have, at the very least, some good examples of ways to do it.
Exactly. So then when you decided to get out of coaching and get into the business world, if you will, did you deliberately take, or kind of take an inventory, if you will, of some of the approaches, lessons that you learned, and started to apply that, and then started your own business? Or talk about that transition from coaching to getting into the corporate world.
Yeah, it was an interesting transition, a fun transition, and it was challenging to put sports practice and methodology into sales. They're very similar in what you're doing, especially at the college level when you're recruiting kids and selling them on the adventure and the opportunity to play football at your university, or sports in general, or do anything at your school. But having conversations with parents probably helped me more than anything. These are people who care. Now I finally can understand, because I have kids of my own, but when I was coaching, I didn't. And the amount of interest that they have in their children and what their children are going to be exposed to and the opportunities their children are going to be given is immeasurable. And so being able to have conversations and be empathetic to the cause and the direction that these parents have for their children vision wise impacted me big time, and gave me a very different perspective on the sales and customer dynamic. So it definitely helped. And I think that the nuance in that career change is probably not very well understood for a lot of hiring managers and things like that.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think everybody should be in some kind of a college or athletic environment before they get into the sales world, because it's it beats you up in a different way, but it still can beat you up. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely agree there.
And now, remind me again. So you didn't go right from coaching into launching your own business. You had a corporate role in between there, correct?
Yeah, so I was between coaching and starting my own business. I worked for a company in Orlando in a business development role that really changed my perspective on sales process and prospecting. I can't thank this group enough, and it was a couple brothers, young brothers, that were invested and started their own company and had a sales team, but didn't have lead generation or prospecting process built at all. And they gave me the opportunity to read some new techniques and study up and apply some of my coaching experience to outbounding that today is really common practice. But there's a contributor and influencer named Aaron Ross who wrote a book called Predictable Revenue. He worked at Salesforce for a long time and helped really develop and build the current SaaS sales model. And hit this book, which is it's like 60 pages. It's the fastest read in the world. Really helped me understand what they were trying to do from a sales standpoint and building pipeline and building that predictable revenue. And because the information and process was new at the time, gave me a spin in selling my consulting to sales organizations down the road, which helped me develop into a SaaS salesperson myself, which I've been loving.
That's great. That's great. And so at what point did you start to think about launching your own business? Was that something you had thought about earlier on, or how did that come to pass?
Yeah, great question. It's something that I had always wanted to do. It sounds silly, but like when I was in middle school or high school, I took one of those, job placement tests, like what would you be good at? And I took these tests that kept on suggesting I be a business owner or like a key stakeholder in a business. And I didn't have that drive. I didn't feel like a creative business person. I didn't feel like that label necessarily applied to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I had an idea for a company, a software company, while I was working for these guys in Orlando, and I was really excited about it and couldn't wait to tell people about it and get it started. And basically, it motivated me to move back to California, where technology and startups were a little bit more normal. And the environment and the reception for them was a little bit greater. And I thought that consulting for sales organizations and developing relationships was going to be key to getting my idea off the ground. So I got to work doing that and started bringing sales process that I had learned at my previous company to other sales organizations and relationships I had built in the sports world. And I never got my startup, off the ground, but I was able to sell my business, and it was great. I had a roster of clients and really understood what it was going to take to sell software, and so it was a good transition job for me, and super duper stressful, as you know, being a small business owner.
Oh no, it's a piece of cake. Yeah, never any stress.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, you're right. Never mind. It was totally easy. But it was really fun and meaningful work for me and my family, and I got to be around my daughter when she was born, and be there for all of my children's births. And being a college football coach, I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that. Being a small business owner, I knew I was going to have a hard time doing that if I really wanted to be successful doing that. So. Awesome career changes, and there's been a few of them, like you said.
That's great. That's good. Well, it's not. I mean, everybody thinks that their career is going to be kind of this, hockey stick, kind of an upward trajectory, if you will. But it's much more like this in most cases. And you never know what you take on today is going to help affect you in a positive way, a year from now or 2 years from now. One of the things that you mentioned before that I wanted to kind of touch on was about recruiting. You're talking about recruiting, obviously, and working with parents as you're helping to recruit their kids into the school. And I would imagine that would be a pretty emotional conversation. right? As you said, it was before you were a parent, but now you understand, why there was so much, kind of tied into what school their kids went to. But I'm curious about how you managed that emotion, if you will, and how maybe that has shaped your sales approach, your sales style, with empathy, working with your customers, because they obviously have a lot of passion and a lot of connection to their decision to use the Dialpad platform also.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question, and I think for a sales process to really be meaningful, there has to be an emotional tie-in to it somewhere. I think oftentimes emotion in the relationship or rapport that you build with somebody can help win a deal or lose a deal. And it's the same thing with recruiting and bringing players or staff members into a role. There has to be something deeper than just the surface level understanding, or like the numbers or the data or the value. There's greater opportunity and a deeper relationship, and for the individuals that I looked for in my recruiting process were individuals that were motivated beyond the surface level. They wanted to be successful in more than just the sport. They wanted to be successful people. They wanted to be successful teammates. They wanted to be successful siblings. They competed with more than just the opponent. They compete with themselves, and that you discover that stuff the more vulnerable you become from a relationship standpoint, the more open and empathetic you become in your selling process. You understand the customer at a deeper level, and I think that that's something that is it's a really difficult skill to learn. I think that that's something that folks have built into them, and if they aren't empathetic, then they've really got to work at it.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is something that's very tough to teach. It's not a technical skill. It's not read this book or learn this formula or do this coding and all of a sudden you become more empathetic. That's just not how it works. It really comes through kind of life experience. I'm sure you probably had questions from parents that maybe you weren't able to answer, right? And how do you overcome that when you're face to face or even on the phone with a parent and they want something that's really important to them about their child's future that maybe you don't have the answer at your fingertips?
Yeah, and that comes up in any sales process. I think that not having the answer is okay in any sales process, and having resources at your disposal to tie in other relationships or tie in other people's experiences to help gain comfortability there, and even if you're not providing a black and white answer, you're providing a sense of trust and interest that can help move the needle for folks. Yeah, I mean that's really tough when you're selling essentially to parents, and they ask things that you don't have the answer to, or sometimes the answer you have isn't the best answer. And I think at that point you've just got to be honest, and sometimes that means not winning the deal,
Right.
or not getting the player, or the student athlete. I think that's a normal thing, and if we can accept that that's a normal thing, and that different people's values lie in different places, that all we do is grow from that.
Yeah, so true. And I think there's so much pressure on sales teams these days to just sell, and just hit those numbers, those KPIs, and just keep going. Whether it's ratios of calls to closing, whatever it might be. But like you said, sometimes the answer is, you know what, we're not the best platform for you, or we're not the best resource for you. It happens to me on the recruiting side as well. There are times where I'll tell clients, you know what, I'm not going to be the best recruiter for you based on what you're looking for, but let me refer you to a couple other folks that might be a better resource for you. And that's okay. I mean, I think they respect that. It makes me feel better. I can sleep at night, not trying to cram a square peg in a round hole. And my whole team kind of sees that also. So it's okay to say no. You be the one to say no, we're not the right fit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes what you get is people begin at that point selling themselves, and they value that relationship and the trust that they just built with you in looking for, well, you know what, that may not be as important to me as I thought, or maybe this can help account for that. It's a great point, Ken.
Exactly, yeah. So I know that you're not technically in a leadership role right now in terms of managing a team, but as you and I have talked about many times, people tend to come to you, right, to ask questions, or maybe in a more kind of cone of silence kind of a capacity, right, versus going to their boss right away. So yeah, exactly, right, cone of silence. So are you able to kind of pinpoint in your mind when you're talking to someone, they come to you with an issue or a challenge, and you say, oh, well, here's what I did when I was trying to motivate players or motivate parents, what have you, and this will work really well in this situation with my staff? Is there a cognizant awareness of using the same kind of techniques now that you did when you were coaching?
Yeah, definitely. And when folks come to, I think as salespeople, we should always get better at listening and asking questions and trying to better understand the crux of the question, and like what's really important. And so those, I rely on those techniques a lot, both when my peers come to me now and in other sales roles, or in sports leadership roles too. I think you've got to really understand what's important to the person you're talking to, and a lot of the time that isn't in the question that they asked you, or the like information that they're trying to get from you. So you've got to work at the relationship a little bit, and a lot of the time the folks have the answers to the questions. I think that's the most important takeaway, is a lot of the time people have a leaning, or they understand what they need to do differently, or what they should be doing but aren't doing, or avoiding doing, and they can, the truth's a lot more meaningful when you come upon it yourself than when somebody else tells you.
Very true. Yeah, very true. I know one of the things that you and I have talked about also, especially, in the COVID world that we now live in, is, finding ways to keep your team motivated, right? Aside from compensation. And I know you guys have been very, very busy, but even still, not every phone call with a client or prospect is successful, right? And so we've kind of talked about, trying to celebrate those small wins, or, I think you and I are talking about kind of the 1 yard at a time kind of an approach, right? What are some things that you do with the folks around you to really kind of help them understand, because you've been in sales for a lot longer than a lot of your peers out there. What are some things that you do to help them kind of put things in perspective and try to celebrate those wins?
Well, I think putting yourself in the shoes of your prospect or opportunity helps, can help you celebrate like their intrinsic wins, and can celebrate the relationship a bit more. And so being able to put yourself in their shoes, and and understand their buying process a bit. And I think that's something that a lot of salespeople overlook, is the buying process relative to the sales process. We're so tied, salespeople, including myself, are so tied to a methodology and a process and an information gathering, that we lose sight a lot of the time of what the buying process is, and what matters, ultimately in the steps we're going to be taking with the prospect. So celebrating those wins as much as you celebrate your own wins, celebrating the fact that our customer adopted a phone system that's going to allow them to be more connected, or have richer conversations, is just as cool and just as celebrate worthy as, I closed a deal worth X amount and my commission is going to be Y. I think seeing value below the surface is something that I think can be learned, and should be taught more, frankly, by sales leaders.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. And I'm curious about, I mean, Austin, this is actually a question that we got from one of our members, Joseph, but I know that Austin as a city has kind of really exploded over the last, several years. I know you've been there for, almost 2 years now, a year and a half or so. And I'm curious about that ability to keep people motivated when they potentially may be getting offers and being courted by other companies in Austin, which is a big tech hub. Does that ever come up in conversation also?
Give that to me one more time, Ken,
Yeah.
so I could.
Yeah, I guess in terms of keeping people motivated internally, and sticking with the Dialpad organization and your approach to selling, right? Working in a city like Austin, where it is hyper competitive, there's a lot of other tech companies out there that might be courting other employees as well. Does that come into conversation while talking about what they will learn, what they will experience, and staying with Dialpad versus jumping ship somewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I appreciate you rephrasing the question too. But
Sure.
I think it all goes back to the hiring process and what's communicated to the candidate, and what information is gathered from the candidate in terms of like a fit for the organization. For me personally, in my experience here, coming into Dialpad, I kind of knew what our leadership was about, like where their values stood, and what was meaningful to them beyond just like the cool office with the snacks and TVs and stuff. Like there was a more meaningful connection below the surface, which is a theme I'm hearing myself say. But like that, I think that's a factor. And if you hire people who are looking for more than just a job and a paycheck, that you'll be rewarded with longevity and a more meaningful relationship and better communication when they're thinking about leaving. When we're in a great place right now where we've had a lot of growth in a crazy time in the world, and we have sales reps now who are, growing into other roles outside the company and within the company, and it's exciting to see. And I think that it's a normal thing. I don't think anybody at our company is sad to see them go. I think they're excited about that next step. And also, I would say, I mean, speaking from like an IC, like an individual contributor standpoint, like you really get what you pay for. You should not shy away from paying people what they deserve based on factors beyond just their experience, their ability to connect and like and run a process and manage a relationship from a sales standpoint, or see nuance from a marketing standpoint, really understand trends and like where the market sits. I think you should pay those people a premium, because you're going to get your money back. That's not a question. The question is, are you going to be able to keep those people if you don't pay them enough? So I think those two factors really are things that I see Dialpad as strengths at Dialpad and other SaaS organizations that are growing right now. Their agility and things like that.
That's great. Do you tend to, I'm not saying favor, but do you kind of give extra points to potential hires out there that were also former college athletes, or even high school, but especially college athletes?
Well, I'm not a huge part of the hiring process currently, but I would say I see that in my peers. And I think it goes beyond like their own personal playing experience. There's a attitude and a motivation in college athletes that exists outside of that population of people. I think that people outside of sports are highly motivated and competitive, and they got it from somewhere. or the organizations that they're in foster that type of attitude and like process driven engagement. But yeah, I mean, we've got multiple like Division I athletes that are salespeople at Dialpad, and it's pretty exciting to go to work with those people, and I've coached some people that they know of, and things like that. It's very cool. And I think that population of motivated and competitive individuals within college athletics is definitely greater than that outside of. But there's those people outside of that population too.
Sure, sure, yeah. Yeah, and even in the recruiting that we do also, we see, there's a heightened, if you will, work ethic among folks that either paid their own way through school, went back to get an MBA, later on in life as well during their working experience, or that were college athletes. You just see this really unique kind of work ethic there and discipline, and they know the rigor of getting things done. It certainly exists outside of those populations also, but I definitely see a more kind of amplified example of that in those populations too. Actually, we have a question from someone who's a member who actually is a former athlete in college and continues to be so. But the question from Lauren is, can you talk about empathy and kind of what it looks like in today's sales climate? Kind of what shifts do you see being there right now, and is it here to stay? You talked earlier about looking at more than just the paycheck, right? And the way that you approach things and answer questions. Do you think that empathy is becoming more prevalent out there? Do you see it more as part of the sales training, and motivation process?
I think the like techniques for empathy are being taught more right now, at least in the last couple months. Some of you are probably familiar with Chris Voss and his book Never Split the Difference, which is an amazing book. I recommend everybody read it, whether you're in sales or not. But the tactical empathy piece and the questions to ask and the labeling and stuff like that, those techniques are being taught right now, and I think that it's valuable. I think what's going to be sad is if those techniques aren't taught post COVID-19. That's a great question, Lauren, because empathy in sales is much more important than just COVID-19 or equal rights. I think that empathy as a culture and as a species should be heightened, should be more important, more emphasis should be put on it. So definitely it's topical and it's in vogue right now, which is great. I see it as an opportunity to introduce it into the mainstream. It should be something that everybody's talking about all the time. It helps you sell. And the baseline, sure, you can accomplish more goals, you're going to meet quota better, but also you're going to enrich people's lives. And I think that there's a lot to be said for caring about what the person across from you thinks is more important than closing the deal. Caring about what matters to them is going to help you close the deal, but it's also going to validate that person and the relationship and build trust. And those are all things that are a lot more valuable than dollars and cents.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and those are things that if they are taught, whether it's sales or operations or any function out there, if they're taught more often and discussed more often, then it might actually help out with some of the issues out there in terms of being more sensitive and empathetic for in the COVID times, but also in terms of equal rights as well. If we all just kind of understand the other person's perspective, whether you're selling or whether you're just living your life, I think it goes a very, very long way. And I agree.
Yeah.
Another question that came up actually from Joseph, which I thought was a great question, is and I think we all have these experiences, but would you say that you've learned more from the games that you won when you were coaching, or the games that you lost when you were coaching?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I've been asked it before, and so I know my answer. I won't hem and haw about it. All the time, no matter what the scenario, you learn more from your losses. I think that it's easy to be validated from your success, and you get confirmation bias, and that's not healthy. I think when individuals face adversity and opportunities to grow from loss, those lessons are a lot more valuable, and the individuals who are receptive to that type of learning and don't just throw their hands up and say I lost, boo-hoo, are are, more valuable people, frankly. I think that those individuals should be acknowledged for seeing adversity and loss as an opportunity to grow. I learn a lot, if I'm talking about a play like X's and O's from a football standpoint, a 60-yard run is a lot less impressive to me than a 4-yard run, consistently. I would much rather have an efficient play than a flash in the pan. If I know I can lean on this consistency for 60 minutes in a football game, or for 3 months in a sales cycle, I'm going to lean on that every time than just trying to hit home runs or those big plays. So and you get to that consistency through adversity. You try a lot of things that fail to learn that consistency and find the things that work that you can keep in your toolbox.
Yeah, that's great. That's very, very, very well said. I can see why you said you had your answer ready to go. That's very well articulated. And I think that's tough also when you've got people on the team that are more seasoned, that have some battle scars, right, in terms of sales. They understand that. But newer folks coming in that want to just jump right to the top and they figure it's going to be just only successes along the way. They haven't had that seasoning yet, right? They haven't seen the fact that I will learn a lot more from the things that I didn't do well, because it helps to fine tune my approach and my strategy going forward. But it can be tough to kind of employ that on folks that are earlier in their career.
Yeah, and I think our culture, younger folks who are entering the workforce are used to a lot of instant gratification. When you put a post online, you get instant likes. Influencers get hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of likes or comments, and that instant gratification, it is desirable. Right. I like that. I like to be validated, but I think you're right. Hard work and the reward from the intrinsic reward from hard work, even if you get less immediate response, is going to be greater for you in the long run.
Right. Yeah. True. Very true. Yeah. We all like that dopamine hit, right? When we get a validation or someone comments on our blog, we're like, oh my God, that's the best thing ever.
Totally.
Yeah. Exactly. So I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about, I know your role is inside sales, and that's obviously a big part of what's a lot of software companies, a lot of SaaS companies rely on inside sales. I'm curious about the interplay that you have between your role on inside and the folks that might be out in the field. And then also, if you see any evolution or changes in terms of the interplay between sales and marketing, again, back to the whole empathy piece, especially companies trying to figure out right now, how do we market? How do we do it in a way that's not going to sound tone deaf? That's going to still going to get our messaging across, but let's work with sales to figure out what messaging is going to work the best. Are you seeing any changes there between sales and marketing, or inside and outside sales?
Definitely. Definitely on the marketing piece. Our former CEO at Dialpad, Keith Messick, is an awesome personality, fantastic speaker, but I think he has one of the best perspectives that I've heard on the relationship between sales and marketing. He's a former sale. He'll be the first to tell you. I was listening to a podcast by him, and he was a programmer, like a engineer, and then a salesperson, and then a marketer, and he's kind of done a little bit of everything. And his experience speaks to his talent as a marketing leader. I'll touch on that. I'll come back to that a little bit, but I think the relationship between inside and outside sales is changing right now. We're in a really dynamic time because buying organizations are seeing less of a need for an outside sales role. They're not needing the regional engagement because they're being forced right now to buy from inside salespeople, whether they are field sales reps or not. They are in their living room or their guest
Right.
bedroom. So like everybody essentially is like somewhere between inside and outside sales right now, and the dynamic is changing. I think it it leans itself, the importance of the two roles is falling back a lot more on the individual personality of the reps, their work ethic and ability to like prospect and run a full cycle themselves versus depend on inbound leads and opportunities. So I think the dynamic is changing, and I think when the dust settles and we have a new normal down the road, I think there's going to be a lot more crossover between those two type of positions. There's going to be some sort of hybrid that most people fall into, and marketing is going to depend on that. Marketing is sales driven, and we're still figuring out right now in this pandemic what is important to buying companies. How agile are they in adopting new technology that's going to enable their workforce to do whatever they're going to need to do now, which is a confusing statement, but
No, but you're right. I mean, it's a confusing time. So it's well said. I mean, everything is just so fluid. It's tough
yeah.
to figure out what to hang your hat on. And we even some of our clients have had one specific profile, a job description in mind when we first launched the search, and then things change because everything is changing around them, and so their need as a business changes also. So I think kind of fluidity is a very relevant word these days, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another great question from Joseph also is around kind of leadership, but also around mentorship, right? So when you were kind of early on in your coaching career, did you have someone that you looked to, or did they kind of match you up with a more seasoned coach to help with that? And then how does that translate, or has that translated in terms of mentorship there at Dialpad also?
Yeah, great question, James. I think is it James or Joseph?
Joseph, yeah, sure.
Joseph, sorry, Joseph. Great question, Joseph. I think mentorship's really important. I think when it is a like labeled or applied mentorship, it can be less impactful than an organic one.
Mm-hmm.
Folks that like gravitate towards one another from a mentee standpoint, like in job progression and things like that, tend to be more impactful than like a prescribed mentor. I think that there's opportunity for both. And in coaching, I will say I was not the like typical coach, upcoming coach from a relationship standpoint. I played small college football. I didn't have a ton of like relationships at the level that I wanted to coach. And so it took a lot of work on my end to develop those relationships and get some momentum going in that direction. And none of the coaches that I knew really had those relationships either. My high school football coach is one of my closest friends. I love him, and he isn't well networked in college coaching, which is where I wanted to be. And part of that's just his process. He wasn't big on pushing kids into college sports, but he gave me an opportunity. And he's more of a mentor for me from like a family standpoint and raising healthy, intelligent, happy children, which is much more valuable than being a football coach, by the way. But those natural relationships that develop, and I eventually did get a mentor. He might not even know that he's my mentor at the college level, but my friend Tim, who's a Division I football coach, has been a coach for like 30 years and has done everything at every college, is an example of what coaches should be, as far as I'm concerned. And I always aspired to be like him from a coaching standpoint. And I learned a lot from him, and it wasn't an expressed like mentor-mentee relationship that we had.
Like it more organic, like you talked about. Yeah, exactly. And then what does that come up? and I don't, and you know, the younger generation now is a little bit different. I know, based on my two kids, 23 and 18, I know there's not as much comfort level right off the bat in talking to someone and about that kind of formal mentorship. But do you get people that come to you either inside Dialpad or maybe even from your former employers that say, hey, you know, can you help me? They may not use the word mentor, but does that happen organically these days? Do you see that?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And I get a lot of that uh, synergy when I go looking for information and relationship building techniques too. I think that a strong mentor-mentee relationship is symbiotic. So, you know, um, everybody has opportunity to learn from everybody, and identifying that and just knowing that you don't have all the answers and know everything can help develop those relationships for you. There's some other salespeople and sales managers outside of the sales, or managers outside of the sales org at Dialpad that I am gravitating towards because I like their style. I like the way they communicate. I think that they have good vision on what's important, what isn't, and I can take some of that and build it into my sales process.
That's great. Very good. Yeah, and I agree. I think being open to answering questions and providing insight and market intel without expecting anything in return, that's really kind of the best way to become a natural mentor, if you will.
Yeah.
And it goes a very, very long way. And I think that's really needed out there. I think that should be encouraged more than it is, to be honest, because it really helps out quite a bit. I mean, you have CEOs of, you know, Fortune 50 companies that have mentors and have leadership coaches, and you know, so everybody can benefit from it without question. It's not just an early career thing.
Yeah, big
Yeah.
time. Totally agree.
So question, and this is kind of just my own curiosity, what are you seeing as far as your clients go, right? Because a lot of your clients are switching over to the VoIP system that you guys offer. It's obviously much more robust, and it really helps to capture a lot of the information that's being gathered by their sales teams. The transcription pieces also. What are you getting any sense for whether this is going to, this current normal, let's put it that way, the current normal, is it going to continue on and become the new normal, you know, post-COVID, let's say a year from now? What are you kind of expecting to see out there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been you know, communication has been trending in our direction for a long time, and our TAM, like our market of customers, is massive. Which is one of the reasons that I was attracted to Dialpad. Is, I mean, every business everywhere in the world has a phone. They need to communicate. So as a salesperson, if you sell a product that has a big market, that's an exciting thing. It's even better if the product is really innovative and different, which we are. But you know, if you look at like VoIP systems, I think have about, you know, think of all the businesses in all the world that have phones, only about like 8% of them tops have a VoIP system. The rest of them are still using legacy, you know, hardware phone systems. And right now, everybody's attention is shifting towards, you know, cloud phone systems, and the more modern the better, because we're you know, going to be more future proof than even the early cloud PBX type systems that are out there. So I think it's a really exciting time to be in my business, and need to be sensitive about how excited we get, because a lot of people are feeling a lot of pain in their current systems. But that if you think about the adoption to cloud and the value that exists in the cloud versus like hosted systems, or, you know, on-prem systems that exist currently, you know, everybody either has moved or is moving their productivity suite to the cloud, to like an O365 or G Suite type environment. You know, everybody is moving or has moved their CRMs to the cloud, and they're moving their file sharing to the cloud, and the communication piece is a natural step somewhere in that process. Sometimes it's first, sometimes it's last, but it's going to happen. So it's, you know, really exciting to be here right now.
That's great. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have a VoIP system also at Turning Point, and it's been great for us also. It's just a natural move over here, and it just makes things so much more streamlined. And we've been virtual since day one, right? So it's been 13 years, but yeah,
Yeah.
so I can certainly see why it's been such a huge value to a lot of your clients these days also.
Yeah, absolutely.
So another question from Joseph, actually, talking, and I think I want to kind of frame it this way. So the question is, did you, when you were coaching, did you talk to parents about kind of the future of their kids after football? And I want to kind of juxtapose that against the folks that you're talking to that are earlier on in their sales careers and say, okay, so what do you want to do? What's your long-term career vision? Do you want to become a CSO? Do you want to become a CEO? Do you want to have your own business? So I'm curious about those two, scenarios and conversations.
Yeah, I mean, so much of it falls back on the personality and the like, what's valuable to the person you're talking to. Parents are going to be different in their opinion than the student athletes, and like what's motivating them.
Right.
As they step into adulthood and college, and it's the same thing for customers, and it's the same thing for candidates and hiring. As a coach or a salesperson speaking to a potential customer, or a hiring manager speaking to a candidate, like, I think it's really important to ask those questions around what their trajectory is, and where do you see yourself in 5 years. I think I think the information is relevant. I think the question is old, but like, there's different ways to spin and get that information. And a lot of the time, if no matter who you're talking to, if they don't have an answer to that, that's a red flag. If you're buying, if you're selling something to somebody and they don't have a vision for 5 years, 10 years down the road, like, there's an issue there. Nobody one of my peers says this all the time, and I steal the heck out of it, but nobody evaluates phone systems for fun. Like, nobody is going out like on the weekends and like shopping for business phone systems. It's not an exciting thing to do. So like, if you are spending the time evaluating, and this falls across most products, like, you should have vision for what, as a buyer, you should have vision for what your organization is going to look like in down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And let me help craft that vision with you. Maybe you have a rough sketch of it and we can turn it into a piece of art, but like, don't ask me to make it for you. Don't ask me to sell you like your vision, because I don't know what your company looks like or is supposed to look like, or I have no idea. So like, let me be a partner for you in this buying exercise, but and let me give you my thoughts and like help bring you around if that's what you need, and I feel like our solution is going to be the best fit for you. But yeah, that's a important piece of information to gather from everybody you talk to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
everybody you talk to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hear a similar kind of line of thinking from folks that I know that do branding, right, for companies. And they'll come, a prospect will come to them, and the first question is, I want a new website. And they will ask, well, why, right? And to your point,
Yeah.
it's just one small piece of the overall issue, or what's happening with your business long term. What is the brand going to be? What are you going to grow? Are you not? Are you going to stay virtual? Are you not? Are you going to have a B2C or a B2B customer base? All those things have to go into the answer to that question. It's not just I need a website. It's I need a vision. I need a strategy and an overall brand strategy. Same kind of thing. I don't just need a phone system. What's the reason why you need a phone system? And what's the reason why a VoIP system would make the most sense? So I totally get that. Yeah. So we have a few minutes left here, and I want to kind of ask you about metrics. I want to kind of touch on that just a little bit, because obviously working from home, and I know you've been working from home for a while also, as have I. But I guess two questions. So the first one is, has your company put different tracking mechanisms in place to track you and your peers in terms of productivity? That's the first question. Has that changed at all? And secondly, do you feel like whatever is in place, is that efficient? Is it a good measurement of tracking your productivity and your successes?
Yeah, good question. I'm a big fan of metrics and numbers. I feel like it's such a window to the health of an organization. And I think the more successful we become, oftentimes the less reliant we become on the numbers. And I think that the opposite should be true. And the more successful we become, the more we should understand what's driving that success. Dialpad's really unique in that our phone system, any organization that is selling via the phone or via email is collecting information, what information they can, as much as they can, to understand their sales process and close rates and conversion, qualified opportunities converting, and stuff like that. Like, we're really fortunate in that our phone system, through the artificial intelligence, can automate a lot of that. Like, we can not only see how many calls an agent or a sales rep has made, but how many of those calls were actually answered by a person versus a voicemail. And it's cool technology, and it gives us a greater view into the content of calls and the meaningful number of connections versus just like here's like a really high number that doesn't have much meaning associated with it. So we're blessed in our ability, and our customers are blessed in our ability to look at least that component of the business differently. But I think that everybody should inspect what they expect. Like, if you are driving business, you need to understand the key, the KPIs associated with your success, and tear them down. Like, and run scenarios where you don't meet them and understand why. And any sales process is really numbers driven, not driven necessarily, but like numbers adjacent. You can understand your process better by understanding your numbers better. And a lot of people buy CRMs and then don't use them. So like, Salesforce is expensive. if you're gonna own that thing, and you should, because it's beautiful. If you're gonna own a CRM, be it what it may, like, you should be getting numbers out of it that help you understand your business and do it better. And you should hire people that are driven to push those numbers that are meaningful to your organization. So yeah, metrics are big, and I could keep rambling about them, but there should be more more real action put into the, like, everybody says and agrees that numbers are important and good, but like, not everybody does what it takes to understand those numbers and base their business off those numbers.
Exactly. Yeah, and we see it also on the recruiting side. There are companies that you can tell pretty quickly that they're using just kind of generic, one size fits all numbers, where we just track sales, we just track number of hits to the website. Well, those are they're important, but they're not everything, and it's going to change depending upon what you're doing, launching a new product, whatever it may be. So I agree, metrics are important, but having the right metrics is even more important than actually using that system that you put in place, rather than just having it set up on a shelf.
Yeah. It's really easy to like see numbers that like indicate your success.
Right.
So
right.
I just got a check in the mail. That means I must have made a sale at some point. But like, but understanding why you made that sale can help you make more sales.
Right.
Understanding what information is important to your customers can help you market to them, which will help drive leads and sales. Helping understand what's important to your customers can help you retain your customers and reduce churn. So, man, numbers are a big deal.
Exactly. I think it's Gary Ridge, who is the CEO of WD-40 here in San Diego, and he has this big mantra around, don't just grade my paper, help me get an A, right? So help me figure out how to do better, how to don't just give me kind of a one snapshot analysis of what I did, but how do I do better? How do I improve? That's what it's all about. So I completely agree. Yeah.
And if you hire a person who cares about why they're successful and why they're unsuccessful, like, keep that person.
Right.
They will hit. they will hit their goals. It might take them a minute to ramp, but like if they care, if they're asking about why they're winning deals or why they're losing deals, like, and they're doing something about it,
right,
then that person is valuable.
exactly, and they genuinely want to improve and want to find a way to make it work. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll kind of leave it up to you, John, as far as the last parting words. Any parting words of wisdom or insight you want to share with the group, you know, and around success, failure, whatever it might be?
Wow. I think you said it best. Like success is not a straight line. You know, it's a very, very jagged line. It loops and twists and turns. I think that what if I conveyed anything to the group, and I would hope that it would be like, you know, the importance of empathy in the, you know, business cycle, not just sales and marketing, but like every aspect of the business, and increasing empathy and awareness amongst your organization through, you know, taking the pulse of the people that work for you or alongside you, and understanding what's important to them, and through example, showing them to get that information and care about those relationships that they're building. I'm finding, because I'm not a naturally empathetic person, will make a huge impact
That's great.
in business. Maybe not immediately, but it will down the road.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you, John. I really appreciate it. And as you mentioned at the outset as well, I know you're always willing to connect with folks on LinkedIn and have other conversations, and you might have some other questions come to you that way. So we appreciate you making yourself available.
Absolutely. I encourage everybody, please find me on LinkedIn. I'm not hidden. Connect with me, and I've already had a few conversations with folks from this group, or from like the emails, and I've really been enjoying them. So please keep it up.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for being our inaugural Austin-based speaker. I'm looking forward to having at least one a month going forward. So we'll keep this trend going.
I like that, and I'd like to get more Austinites
Yes.
in the room. We're
That'd be
working on
great.
that too.
Yeah, we'll keep the marketing going. Speaking of messaging, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate you all being here, and we'll see you back in early August for our next speaker, who also is based out in Austin. Her name is Jessica Taylor, and she is a former Rackspace and Dell employee. So we will see you next month. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye, everybody.